Hello and welcome to today's webinar for dads. It's another beautiful morning here in Belgium. My name's Nikki, also known as the Scottish Soul Sister, and I have created this series of webinars for the village. We often talk about supporting birth mums, which is a huge part of my job. But I started identifying that no one's supporting the village. They are expected to know what to do and how to support. So I created a series. I have already done the grandparents one and the expecting parents one. There's more to come. But today we're focusing on dads. My husband Kevin is an amazing dad. And we were chatting last night, about me coming on here today and talking to you guys. And I said, what would you like to have known when Archie was born back in 2017? And that has been incorporated into today's chat. I think we're often expected just to know things about each other, about our partners. And of course, that's not realistic. So, without sugarcoating, without scaremongering, regardless of what stage you're at in your fatherhood journey, if you're an expecting dad or you're already a dad, maybe you're going to be a stepdad, a foster dad, an adoptive dad, however it looks, this information is for you. And I hope that you get some value from it today. We'll open up later for Q&A, so take notes, make sure you've got a cuppa. I've got my coffee here, and let's get going. So a quick introduction as to why I do what I do. I am very obviously Scottish. If you need subtitles, let me know. I have lived overseas for the last 17, almost 18 years now, spending 7 in Jakarta, Indonesia, where I had my first business, which was a hair and beauty salon. When I met Kevin and we started talking about getting married and having a family, we relocated to Montenegro. We were in Tivat, which was amazing. That was 6 years of our chapter. We then went to Dubai, where we spent 4 years, and we are now currently in Antwerp, Belgium. So pretty well travelled. And during that time, I've had the opportunity to meet different people in different cultures and of course look at all this parenting stuff from these different perspectives. So it's been useful for me. When Archie was born in 2017, I suffered from postpartum depression and anxiety, really for around 18 months. It wasn't linear, it wasn't all the time. But it took me 18 months to reach out and get the support that I needed. And when I did, it completely changed everything. The trajectory of not only my personal life, but my professional life too, because these were the lessons that I took and decided to pay forward and to help other families. So I now focus primarily on maternal mental health and parents. So that's lucky for you guys that are here today. The framework that I use for everything that I do is around the concept that we each have 6 human needs. Pretty much everything I talk about will feed back into that framework. So if you've never heard of this before, the 6 human needs are certainty, variety, love and connection, significance, growth, and contribution. I use it in my sessions with clients if I am at a speaking event, and I use it as the heart of the digital resource that I created called Stepping into Parenthood. Now, normally with these webinars, you find that, the presenter will do their chat, and then at the end, you'll get the time-sensitive sales stuff. I don't like doing that. I prefer to be transparent and tell you from the get-go what's going on. So the way that I can support you are through one-to-one sessions, individually or as a package. And my main product, my baby, is Stepping into Parenthood, the digital resource. It's €99. There's no time sensitivity or lower pricing and trying to back you into a corner. It's €99. It is yours forever. It's self-paced. There's no time constraints on there. I am not involved with it. You don't have to have accountability to me, which was important because many courses are about accountability. But I felt that this space, you've got enough going on. You don't need me breathing down your neck. So that is why it's created in the manner that it is, where it is self-paced. You guys work through it together, get the family involved, and you can revisit anytime. There are worksheets, there are quizzes, you can do it digitally, or if you're old school like me, you can print off the worksheets and use paper and pen, get your sexy stationery on the go. But it's yours, and you can do it, as things evolve, things change, which they do, then you can revisit. And we still utilise it. My husband and I use the worksheets every week. We do meal plans and time schedules. And so, we're practicing what we preach. So that's your sales pitch done. Back to how I can support you guys and how you can support yourself. So the 6 human needs. Then I like to break things down because we hear a lot about self-care, about wellness. The industry has just blown up in the last few years, hasn't it? Which is amazing, but also can be overwhelming. So what I like to do is break down what does self-care mean? And I put it into where you imagine you have 3 accounts. So your first account would be your medical, clinical account, your physical body. Making sure that you are getting your eyes and ears checked. For the guys, getting your prostate checked. For the ladies, our mammograms, our smears. Looking after our physical body, our eating habits, looking at our vitamins and hormone levels. You can get simple blood tests that can determine if there's a vitamin deficiency. So looking after our well-being in that sense, that is self-care, and that's the first account. Your second account are your luxury things, right? So whether that is playing around the golf, going away for a weekend to a hotel, whatever it is, getting a massage, things that are enjoyable, that make you feel good at that time, but perhaps not things you're able to do every day. And our third account is your daily account. And this is where I believe the power lies. And everything that I have learned in the last 7 years, man, I wish I knew before. But, we've got the pleasure of hindsight, haven't we? So these are your daily habits, how you are spending your time. Are you intentional with your time, or do you run about like a headless chicken, right? Your external stimulus, which can be what you read, what you watch on TV, what you listen to, what you're scrolling through, the people that you're around. All of these things have a huge impact on our moods and our behaviours and our emotions, and sometimes we're not even conscious of it. When I began this chapter of my life, I was someone who, I had previously experienced feelings of anxiety, feelings of depression. And I was someone who would watch the shows on TV about true crime and murder. I would read about stuff like that. It was always a darker, element. I would listen to Damien Rice and Anthony and the Johnsons, which is great. But as I started working on my personal development and becoming aware of this external stimulus, I was like, no bloody wonder I'm depressed. And it shifted, something changed. And now I'm so intentional about leaning into the comedy and the music that makes me feel good. And I read things that either challenge my brain or that I find interesting, but not always dark. I still visit the dark side sometimes, of course I do. But what I'm saying is it's about awareness. Nothing that I do in my coaching business is about telling you how to parent. It's about, it's not about telling you what you should and should not do. I don't believe in that because we're all different. We all have different dynamics. Our family setup is unique to us. So what I'm doing is asking you to just raise awareness to what I talk about and implement it into your life and how it works in your life, not how I do it, how it would work for you and your family. So that's the 3 accounts. Becoming a parent, the first thing that I would say is before you get to know your baby, get to know yourself and each other. And I know that that changes, we evolve, but often we're not having the conversations, about what is to come, whether it's about religion, are you going to christen your child? Are you not going to christen your child? What kind of schooling would you anticipate for your child? Where do you want to live? Do you want to be close to family? Do you not want to be close to family? Right? There are lots of areas where the conversations need to be had because sometimes we don't even think about it until we're in that situation. So opening up, your expectations and your communication are going to be two of the main things. Managing our expectations of ourselves, of each other, of our family, our friends, of your employer, right? If if you've got your own business, how is this going to work when there's a child in the mix? So when you start engaging in some of this personal development, when you start understanding what makes you tick, you are gifting yourself clarity. And with clarity, you can make the decisions that you need to make for you and your family. I feel that often we're overwhelmed with information, especially when you're a new parent and you go on Instagram and you're seeing all these different accounts, and that information becomes all consuming. And what I'm trying to invite you to do is to break through that where the decisions are made on you guys. What do you want to do? How does this look for you? And you'll gain a confidence in that when you're doing it from a place of understanding yourselves. If you do it because that chick on Instagram does it, it might not align, it might not feel right. And I feel that in your parenting, you will have way more confidence if it's coming from that space, if it's coming from you guys being completely honest and transparent about how you want to parent. So let's say, for example, the in-laws are coming. How do we feel about that? Do we like the in-laws? Is that a good relationship? What is the expectation? Do you guys stay together? Do you get a hotel room? Looking at situations like this, you will manage any conflict, where sometimes we go head to head because everyone's keeping their mouth shut for a quiet life. But actually, if you're honest about what your expectations are surrounding a particular situation, you can avert any conflict. Okay, so like in Montenegro, when I lived there, new parents would have 40 days without any visitors, without any guests. When I had my son in Scotland, I had my family there. I went to Scotland to deliver our son so that I had my family and friends there. My in-laws flew in from the States. I wanted those people there. I wanted that support. I'm not saying I was the best company. I don't know if I was being a social butterfly, having just given birth, but it was important to me and it was supportive for us to have our family there. Everyone's story is different, but what I'm saying is, can you have the conversation? Do you want the family there? Do you not want them there? Do you need some time on your own? Or do you need that support system to be ready and armed to go? Friends can be a massive support, but also if it's too much, if you are, still processing becoming a parent, or maybe you guys just need more time, however we look at this, life's busy. We live in times that are busier than they've ever been because we're constantly reachable through the phones. We are constantly bombarded with information because of the phones and the social media. Like you can't go to the doctors anymore without there being a TV screen in front of you showing the news. We're constantly bombarded with stimulus. So that comes down to the people that we surround ourselves with as well, our family and our friends. So having the conversations and saying, okay, can we be intentional with our time? Your employer. I feel that employers are getting there with their understanding and flexibility surrounding parents. many companies now are adopting the mindset of as long as the job gets done, then yeah, we can be flexible as to how that happens. I guess there are still some companies that it's 9 to 5 in the office, there's no wiggle room. But that is where these conversations need to happen. What happens if the little one is sick? Who's taking that on? Can we escape? Can we go from work to deal with these things? Because whether we like it or not, our working life and our family life are combined. It's a brilliant theory to have them completely separate, but they impact each other, So speaking to your employer around your family commitments or obligations, understanding who is going to be working. Are you both going to be back in work when the little one's here? Are you going to stay at home with the little one? Is she going to stay at home with the little one? How does this look for you guys? Do you have childcare? Do you have a facility, a creche somewhere? And if you are staying at home to be a stay-at-home mum or dad, have you prepared mentally for that? Because for myself, I was absolutely honoured that I could live out my dream of being a stay-at-home mum. Kevin was working, so he was taking that financial weight, to look after us, and I would stay at home with Archie. But what I didn't realise was that looking after a baby, whilst it's emotionally, physically and mentally tiring, it's not academically challenging, right? You're loving them, you're changing them, you're feeding them. But my brain was getting a bit lax because no longer was I challenging myself with my own work, or I wasn't studying. I wasn't listening to things that interested me. I was listening to music that suited him. I had immersed myself into that world of baby. So what I was doing was I was impacting my growth, one of these 6 human needs. Another thing that I impacted was my significance when it comes to earning money and having a paycheck and going out into the adult world. So whether, it's one of you that's staying at home, it doesn't matter if it's mom, dad, whatever, we all have pride, we all have ego, we all have these needs that when they're not being met can have an impact on how we're feeling. So it's figuring out ways to maintain that during that time. When I started studying a little, and it doesn't have to be a big thing, it can be like 15 minutes a day that you choose something you're interested in. Maybe listening to a podcast of something that conversationally, gets your juices going. Something that makes your brain engage to keep that growth going can have a huge difference on your day. And it's not about going and doing an hour here and an hour there, because when you've got a little one, it's tough to do that. So this is about being intentional with your time and peppering your day. It can be small increments, but when you bring it in, it can really have a massive impact. If you're not discussing these things, if we're not aware of these things, this is where resentment can come in. And I see it all the time, which is why I wanted to do this for dads, because I feel that there's sometimes a narrative, oh, he doesn't understand, and he just goes to his work, and his life hasn't changed. And I don't think that that's fair, because I fully appreciate that for a lot of you guys, that financial burden gets a bit heavier, right? Because it's now on you. You are going to work and you're coming home and trying to support your new family. If your wife or your partner, like me, was struggling, and I didn't understand what was going on, so I couldn't articulate to Kevin, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I think I need. I couldn't articulate that because I didn't have enough knowledge behind me to get curious and explore it. I just knew that I felt like shit. There was a lot of crying. There was a lot of feeling disconnected. And this is one of the things that Kevin said last night when I asked him, what do you wish you had known? And he said, I wish I had educated myself a little further on maternal mental health, hormones, the impacts that that can have, and having a better insight as to what is normal, what can be expected, and when do we look at a bit of intervention? When is it becoming that some support is needed? I personally think if you can start this when you're expecting parents, you'll have that knowledge behind you, and that can help you to make sure you reach out to the right people to get that support. For yourselves, it's looking at your exercise and your nutrition. Because often, as a birth mom, there are going to be massive physical changes, and there's a process for them. But also for dads, because your time is now different. So you perhaps are not getting the time to go to the gym or go for your run or play your sport, whatever you've been doing. For a while, that might not be happening because you're needed at home. Your nutrition, we all get tired. And sometimes when you've just had a day, rather than thinking about something nutritious to eat, you're like, can we just get a pizza? That's fine. I'm not dissing that at all. But what I'm saying is that when we are eating well and we're physically looking after ourselves, we feel better. When we feel better, then we can obviously navigate and manage challenges in our life. So being a parent is amazing, but it also has times where it's draining. So we need to be kind of top of our game, right, to keep on top of it. Which is why I do things like a meal plan. I hate that conversation. What do you want for dinner tonight? I don't know, babe. What do you want? And no one bloody answers. And that is when you end up going McDonald's pizza, But we do a weekly schedule, which makes it much easier. The other side of that, the other thing that impacts is something that I really find important to talk about, which is budgets. Transparency with money is huge because it carries power, right? Whether we like it or not, we all use money to live. And I find that often people give the power to the money. If you're stressed and you're worried about money, then it's time to sit down and have a chat. Do a budget sheet. It's in the Stepping into Parenthood guide. I've put a section in there about this. And especially through a transition, such as becoming a parent, because maybe you have went down to one income. Your expenses are going up. These little people are expensive, and especially if you buy into the gadgets. We did. We bought one gadget. We bought a Babacoosh, which I pushed for, and it was rubbish. But, I saw this Babacoosh, you put the baby on their tummy, you strap them in, it jiggles, and it's supposed to be good for colic and to calm babies. But because we were in Montenegro, to ship it in was the price of the thing again, right? So it cost us a few $100. And I think I actually went on it twice, screamed the house down, and we ended up selling it for €10. Right? But what I'm saying is your budgets, your money, sitting and having the conversations, what's going on. And if you are like us, we were overseas, you've got different outlays, right? Because then you're looking at perhaps medical, you're looking at visas for the wee one, you're looking at flights. You've got another person that you need to book flights for if you're traveling to see family. So your budgets are important. What also can happen, and this is what happened for us, which is why I'm sharing it, when we moved from Indonesia to Montenegro, it was the first time I became financially dependent on someone other than my parents, right? I had always worked from 16, I had worked. And all of a sudden, I was financially dependent on Kevin, on my husband. Now, I said at that time, I cannot come to you and ask you for €10 to go for coffee with the girls. My pride, my dignity would all have been destroyed. So at that time, we sat down and said, okay, this is the money that comes into the house, and we placed it. And that meant that we got, whether you call it an allowance, whatever, it doesn't matter what name you give it. What it meant was that I did not have to ask him for money. So I felt that I still had some control over over my money. Just raising your awareness to this because I feel like this is a common thread, particularly in the expat community, where often, partners are not working. All of a sudden, they don't have a profession. And it sounds awfully like you're just going to while away your days, but it's tough. So having that awareness and having the conversations around money, sit down together, whether you're affluent or whether you're on a budget, sit down together and have that honesty and transparency because it'll just make life so much easier and take away something that can weigh heavy. What else? Your resources, right? So when we have a household, whether we like it or not, laundry has to be done, the house has to be cleaned, food has to be cooked. And we can moan about it all day, but at the end of the day, that's not going to change it. When I had Archie, people would say to me, oh, you'll have to calm down with your cleaning. I'm a bit OCD, personality type, my friends used to call me Monica from Friends. But people saying to me, you have to stop having a clean environment wasn't helpful, right? So what needed to happen was how can we better manage that I get to have an environment that calms me, makes me feel in my safe space, because that's what our homes are, right? It's our safe space. So having a look and saying, okay, how does this work? Can we delegate? Can we outsource? Do you have the means to have someone come in and maybe clean the house for you? Maybe someone does the ironing for you. Maybe you'll bring in a food plan for a while. Bearing in mind that everything is temporary, you don't have to continue with it. It could just be to get you through, the early days of having a baby, or perhaps you've just got an awful lot going on just now. Look at what you can outsource. If you've got older kids, can we delegate chores to them? Everyone helps out. Looking at the household, again, this is a common thread, is that when one parent is staying at home and one parent goes to work, there can be that divide. There can be oh, well, I'm not going to ask them to do anything because they're at work all day. Yeah, well, you're at home all day. Each has its weight and its challenges. And I think when you combine it and look at it as to who can do what, and not simply based on their employment, because the thing is, if you are the person who gets to go to work, you get to go to work. You're coming out of your home environment, you are engaging with other adults, you're gaining significance because you're contributing to a business or a company and you get a paycheck. You're having what is your kind of normal life. But when you're the parent that stays at home, that can feel like it's a different landscape. So it's looking at this and saying, okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that that person is the one that does all the housework and domestic duties, right? Combine it and have the conversations. Things like if you're having a little one, if you've got a baby and you're looking at sleep. If your child is being breastfed, that's tough because then that is on mum. Mum is doing that. But if the baby is taking a bottle, then can you take turns at the nighttime feeds? We personally had decided that I would express milk so that Kevin could feed Archie with the bottle. So we would have one night where I would sleep beside Archie, and the next night Kevin would sleep beside Archie, so that we were equally shattered. But what I'm saying is, it's going to be tiring. There's no escaping having children can be tiring. But if one person is absolutely worn down, they break, then you're down to one person to do everything. So it's better if you can combine it and everyone mucks in and everyone balances out the obligations and the things that need to be done. Whilst you're doing that, whilst you're on this time schedule and being intentional, it's not about being intentional with only the obligations and the appointments and the day-to-day serious stuff. It's being intentional with the things that make you feel good, whether that's your exercising, whether it's going and catching a movie, might just be having a coffee on your own, having a shower in peace. These are all ways to pepper your day. and to make sure that you're meeting those needs and you are, making sure your battery gets charged. If your phone is going down and the battery's here, oh, we plug that bad boy in, because none of us can imagine being without our phone, without charge. The same applies to us. We need to make sure that we are recharging ourselves. Okay? You've been told. Education. I spoke to an expecting mum recently and she said, Nikki, I'm just so overwhelmed with all of the information. And I appreciate that. And that is why finding resources that can help you. So if you come to me, I can give you resources for people who are known and trusted that can help you with sleep, that can help you with feeding. I have a brilliant arsenal of people who I know to be supportive and who I know to be legit, because there's an awful lot out there and it's conflicting information. I only work with people who are not judgmental and who support parents, not tell them what to do. There are still some antiquated theories on things, and I don't find them helpful. When we're pushed into doing a particular thing, there's there's a brilliant meme that's like, showing two slides, and it's like, this one is the breastfed slide and this one is the formula fed. And at the bottom, it's McDonald's. And what it's saying is that, with all the best intentions, we can do one thing and we can try and do this, but often, they'll still eat McDonald's chips off the floor of the car. A doula is something that I had not explored at all, actually, when I was pregnant. And now, knowing what I know, I'm like, actually, that could have been beneficial. I often feel that we have the medical clinical world and we have the holistic, alternative world. And they kind of butt heads quite a lot. When I was delivering my child, I fully, put myself into the care of the medical team in Falkirk, in the hospital. And I didn't really look at things like hypnobirthing or any of these other actually helpful methods. And I think when we bring them together, we can really create a support that is fully comprehensive. I talk about this all the time when it comes to if you feel your partner is suffering from, a postpartum or a postnatal depression or anxiety, you will sometimes find that the medical side will say, don't worry about coaches and talking and, that's not helpful. You just need the medication. And they'll dismiss a lot of the alternatives. And at the same time, you find the holistic ones will be saying, don't go down the medical route because it's just big pharma. They just want you to buy the pills. I personally had a doctor who did prescribe medication, which I needed at that time. I also had a coach and I had a counsellor. I had a little bit of everything. And I encourage you to explore the different modalities if you do need support. For yourself, find someone you can talk to that sometimes it's not a family or a friend. When we speak to family and friends, we at times can wear a veil where we're not fully transparent for lots of reasons. We perhaps don't want them to worry. Maybe we don't want to feel judged or feel shame that things are tough. Maybe we don't want their advice and we already have an idea of what they're going to say to us. So when you find someone out with, so there are, men's groups, Dadla Soul is one of the groups, Andy's Man's Club is another one. They've got quite a few franchises now, I know, up and down in the UK. All of these things are online, there's always things there too. If you need support with that, please get in touch with me and let me help you. I'm here. I'm your safe space. If you want to jump on a call with a coffee and say, Nikki, I've got nothing. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to help my partner. You know, how do you look after a kid? I'm going to work. Sometimes we just need somewhere that we can let all that stuff out. And that in itself can feel better, right? When we just let it all go. That's what I'm here for. You know, I'm not just here for birth mums, I'm here for families. The birth mums they can find it hard to articulate what's going on. I found it really difficult to explain to Kevin what was going on with me because I didn't know myself. And that's why I do invite everyone to explore this concept of having these 6 human needs and breaking it down and saying, how are we meeting them? Or what are we not meeting just now? And when you do that, when you get into a space where you're understanding yourself, your triggers, you've got your support network and your system in place, then it's not so frightening if you have a shit day. You know, I am someone who used to take to my bed if I was feeling anxious or depressed before I had my son. And when I had him and I was feeling like that, he was my catalyst for, well, I can't just go to bed. How am I going to deal with this? And that was when I finally got that support and everything changed, you know. And I think it's more common than we realise. We talk about maternal mental health, and the statistics currently for the UK are 1 in 5 birth mums suffer. But I don't think that number is accurate because there's so many who go undiagnosed. There are so many who just don't reach out for help at all. And there are a lot that are dads because you guys are impacted too. You know, anxiety, depression, these feelings. Yes, as a birth mum, there are hormones and physical changes, biological changes that impact that, but also circumstantial, you know, and the adjustment to having a new baby. The, you know, the anxiety kicks in when we think about the future because all of a sudden we're now responsible for another person, you know, and that can be quite scary, right? But that's why when we get ourselves feeling at our best and feeling strong, looking at our habits, my habits have completely changed. You know, I said earlier about the stimulus, who we hang out with and what we do with our time. You know, I also don't drink alcohol anymore. I really prioritize my sleep, you know, and it's so minimal, isn't it? It's like so basic, these things, but it is. It's like our sleep, getting outside, you know, making sure that you're getting fresh air, that you're stepping away from your workspace or from your phone and really just having that downtime for yourself can recharge you so that you show up as the dad that you want to be and the partner you want to be. You know, this is a very kind of overall chat today, but I wanted to introduce you to these ways of thinking and these things that you can explore so that then you've given yourself that support. You know, you're gifting yourself and you're not hiding away from it. And the fact that you've showed up here today, you know, and you're listening to my dulcet Scottish tones, I commend you. And I know that as a dad, you're smashing it. Please reach out if there's ever anything else I can do. And if you have any questions, just let me know.